Here's a quick look into today's episode.
I hope that you'll take this, the right way, he said, but what makes you such a valuable asset to us captains? You're more than a decade older than all of us, and you have more than a decade of marital experience than all of us, and your kids are older than our kids. And he said, if you were the same age as me, it would be hard for me to trust your counsel. That guy's got some age and some wisdom, so I can trust him. And then he pointed his finger at us and he said, now you are part of that community. You are part of that history. What are we going to write about your contribution? And I tried to think today, like if you were going to say to me, Charlie, what do you think the common denominator is from what you've seen in poor leadership? And I would say it's self-centeredness. It's selfishness. My absolute all-time favorite leader in the Army is General Todd Brown. I would pay for my own PCS to work for that guy. And I can also give you an exact polar opposite of someone who I would pay to never work for. I mean, RASP was awesome, and I failed the board, and I was a non-select, and it broke my heart. 7th group, 3rd group, 173rd, 10th Mountain Division, and it's all because of the smiling providence of God, and because His plan is better than my plan. My goodness, man, I've had a failure. You've had a failure. If you haven't failed at something in the Army, then you haven't tried enough hard things. The number one determining factor on whether a first-term service member will stay or get out is on the leadership of influence that they have.
Welcome to another episode of Teach Me to Fish, where our purpose is to help leaders better understand what drives people. In today's world, the core of recruiting and retaining talent revolves around leadership. And not just average leadership, but motivated, values-based, inspirational leadership. Our purpose is to get a little bit better every day. Progress equals small victories and stacking habits. Habits like getting up early, working your butt off, learning something new, being positive, and surrounding yourself with phenomenal people. Today's episode is with Charlie Shields. Charlie is an Army chaplain who joined the Army when he was 17 years old, grew up as an Army Ranger, and helped stand up some of the most elite units of our time. He finished his enlisted years as a drill sergeant before going to school and becoming a chaplain. Charlie is on a different level in terms of passion and commitment to helping soldiers and families. It is unmistakable when you listen to his story that his heart knows the path that leaders should be on. We all can learn from his advice and his counsel for those who really want to inspire people. So let's get into our conversation with Charlie Shields. But I've been super excited to do this one with you, mostly because when we met in the 173rd, like instantly, once you've been doing this Army thing for more than a couple days, right? A couple of years, like you instantly know, like me and this person have something in common. The things that they say, the way that they act, the way they wear their gear, from head to toe, there's certain things, the shirts that they choose to wear, the way they choose to spend their time. You're like, me and this person have something in common. But then as I got to know you in the 173rd, I realized we had a lot more in common than we thought. And you said you just listened to another episode and you're like, hey, there were some things I didn't know about you. There's a lot of things people don't know about Matt LeClaire. There's more importantly, there's a lot of things that people don't know about Charlie Shields. And that's why I wanted to do this today.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. I'm excited.
Before we dive right into everything, just real quick, tell us who you are, what kind of drives you.
Listen, I'm a preacher, dude. I can talk forever.
That's true. How does the joke go? Is like the worst thing you can do is hand the preacher a microphone and say, not give him any parameters.
That's right. I have 10 short points. So
10 short points. Yeah. And I think you have such a special experience to be able to talk about it. You were an enlisted guy, young Ranger, you were a sergeant, you were an NCO, so you can speak about being that. Now you're a commissioned, you had a break in service. You know what it's like to live outside of the Army, get out of the Army and live outside of the Army. You know what it's like to come back into the Army as an officer. Now you're a chaplain, and you've always had to lead without being the person in charge. You've always had to kind of turn to somebody else and say, I'm not the decision maker, but here's my advice. And you've lived your whole life. I mean, heck, you're doing the same thing with God, right? Like you're not the man, but you're the one giving the advice. And so you've been living your life that way. Let's get into it. That is the direction that I want to kind of go with our conversation. That's why I think you have such a special story
that people need to hear? Because you've seen it from every angle. You've seen it from every angle. We haven't done it always right at every angle, but we've seen it from so many of these angles that a lot of people haven't. But without me, running my mouth, but like, tell us a little bit about who you are and what drives you.
So my name is Charlie Shields. I'm currently stationed in Northern Virginia. 24 years active duty service. I did a little over 8 years as an NCO, had a 17-year break in service, and then direct commissioned as a chaplain in January 2009. Married to Patty. Monday will be 37 years, and I am sitting in the 23rd house that we've lived in 37 years. When people ask me where I'm from, I say wherever my household goods are. I got 2 grown kids. I have a son that's a captain, infantry officer, and I have a son-in-law that is a 64 pilot, and my daughter is married to my son-in-law. They're currently stationed at Fort Knox, and she's about to wrap up her MSW and is going to become an inflict. So we are a family of service.
Oh no, I love it. I absolutely love it. I love the term family of service. I have 2 kids. I'm going to deliver Ryan to West Point here in about 2 weeks, just like you did with Seth. I remember when we were in Vincenza and you were preparing Seth to go to West Point, and I'm taking a lot of those tips when it comes to Ryan. But Brady's in the 101st right now. He just passed the E5 board. Before I get into like what got you started in the Army, and we start talking about that, how you grew up. What are you doing right now? What's got you fired up right now? Like, what's your so we have a North Star that we're going with this conversation. What's got you fired up right now?
So I'm passionate about positive leadership, about impacting the next generation. I'm always honored when I get the opportunity to speak in front of any crowd, and I can talk about service and the importance of influence on others. A couple of years ago, Mike Klepper, invited me to speak, not give the invocation, but be the guest speaker at 3rd Ranger Battalion's ball as a plank holder there from 1984. And I spoke there about how growing up from a 17-year-old kid to an NCO in the Ranger Regiment shaped my life. And I talked about 4 lessons that I learned there. Probably one of the highlights of that is so good was afterwards. I was about to deploy. I was the brigade chaplain at 10th Mountain Division, 2nd Brigade. We were about to go to Afghanistan in October. The ball, I believe, was early October. So we were going a couple of weeks later. And Mike called me and he said, "Hey, Sergeant Major Johnson and I did not RFS 2 Rangers today, but we could have because of what you had to say at the ball. Sometimes we are too quickly to cut sling load on good men that make poor decisions when they're young and immature." And he said, "I just wanted you to know that we did not RFS 2 dudes today because of that." And I just thought, man,
Wow.
That is awesome. Because I told 4 stories when I should have been RFS and wasn't. They're pretty funny. They're not good for today's culture, but they're pretty funny.
Yeah, I love that, Charlie. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Thank you for sharing that. And I thank you for kind of giving us that North Star, that like everything we talk about today, we get to know who you are, because it's super important to know who you are and where you come from before we kind of dive into the meat and potatoes, which is the what is positive, the impacts that positive and negative leadership can have on people. And what are some of those common things, if that's the meat and potatoes, but before we get into that, we got to know what makes you the resident expert on those kind of things. Like why? So what kind of drove you towards the Army in the first place?
So I am a Gen Xer. I am a textbook Gen X kid, born 1966 in Indiana. Grew up, my mother was not in my life. I lived with my father. He was an over-the-road truck driver. And I grew up as a latchkey kid. From an early age, I heard about my dad's stories from Korea. My grandfather was a World War II vet. All of my dad and my grandfather's friends were all war veterans, all Navy and Marine Corps and Army. And I remember as an early age thinking that I want to be a soldier. And so when I turned 16, I didn't know anything about joining the military. I went and saw an Army recruiter, and he said, "You can't join until you're 17." And I literally got a calendar and hung it on my bedroom wall and started crossing the days off the day that I turned 16 until the day I turned 17. I went in and saw an Army recruiter, and I said, "I want to join the Army and I want to be an airborne ranger." And he asked, how old are you? And I said, "I'll be 17 tomorrow." And so he said, "Come back tomorrow and see me." And I went back. I took the ASVAB test. I got like a high enough GT score to be an infantryman. I didn't know about bonuses. I didn't ask about bonuses. I said, all I want to know is, can I be an airborne ranger? And he came out to the house the next day, and the day after I turned 17 on June 26th in 1983, I had what's now called an Option 40 contract for a brand new battalion that the Army was standing up called 3rd Range Battalion. And so I graduated high school a semester early and left for basic training in January 84, and went to basic, AIT, Airborne School, RIP, and I was in Seacoast 2nd Platoon 375 when it activated in October 1984. Spent a couple of years there, went to Ranger School in 85, became an NCO, and then in 86, the Army was starting up LURS companies from Vietnam. I'd read a ton about that, about the LURS Ds. And so I said, hey, they were asking NCOs from the Ranger Regiment to go. And so I volunteered for that. So I went to Germany in 1986, the fall of 86, and activated another brand new organization called Echo Company 51st LURS. Came back as a cohort, was in the very first LURS Link class with just all NCOs. It was all 1st, 2nd, 3rd Ranger Battalion NCOs and Ranger School instructors that were there. Spent 3 years there, met my wife there, and then got selected to be a drill sergeant. Came back to the States, was a drill sergeant for a couple of years, and I came to faith in Christ. I became a Christian as a drill sergeant. That's funny. Someone said, how'd that happen? I said, man, I was so mean, I scared myself to God. And so I was converted to faith, and it came time to re-enlist, and just sensed that God was leading me to do something different. And so I got out of the Army, went to school.
Before we kind of go into that part, you said it was time to leave the Army. You felt like God was pulling you in a different direction. Were you a drill sergeant at Fort Benning at the time?
I was a drill sergeant for MPs at Fort McClellan, Alabama.
And so did you stay in Alabama and start school there?
So, and my wife had graduated from Jackson State University and Jacksonville State University out in Alabama. And so I thought I would go to school and get a degree in criminal justice. And I wanted to go to the FBI and be like on a TAC team. But as soon as I decided to get out of the Army, I just immediately sensed that wasn't what He wanted me out of the Army, but he didn't want me to go to the FBI. I sensed that he wanted me to enter in the ministry in some way, shape, or form. And I didn't grow up in church. I didn't know what any of that meant. I didn't know what it meant to be a preacher or to be a minister of any kind. And so I went to see my pastor and just said, hey, I kind of sense that God is leading me to do something in the ministry, and I'm not sure what to do. And so he gave me some really good coaching. And I'll tell you what he said. I've said this 1,000 times in life. He said to me, listen, you got to go to school and you've got to get a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. And if you can afford it and you have the endurance, a doctorate degree. He said, because we have too many uneducated preachers in the pulpit today. And he said, we don't need another uneducated preacher preaching. So go get some education, sharpen your axe so you can have a sharp axe for the rest of your life. And so I did that. I ended up going to school. I went to a Baptist college in Florida. I did 4 years and 3.5. And then I went and got a master's degree in Memphis at Mid-America Baptist Seminary. And then I went and got a doctorate of ministry and expository preaching at Southern Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky.
So when you said earlier that you had like a 17-year, you had this big long break in service, the whole time you were on this break in service, you were in school.
12 of the 17 years I spent in school.
Wow.
Yeah. I worked, I paid for it all. I didn't have the GI Bill. I joined the Army. When I joined, I was a rock. I was a great Ranger private. So I didn't get a bonus. I didn't sign up for no GI Bill of any kind. When I got out, I told Patty, I said, I don't even know if I got a physical when I got out of the Army the first time.
You got a DD-214 and it probably wasn't even filled out right.
Yeah, they were like, "Don't lose this," and I think it was one of those whole something printer. It's like paper thin. It's like it's printed on daggone onion paper.
Yes, I have the same one in my I Love Me book right now.
Yeah, I worked 2 or 3 jobs and paid for my school as I went. So I didn't borrow any money. I got a couple scholarships and I got a little help along the way. But and then I pastored a church while I was working on my master's degree and my doctorate degree. So I was pastoring churches the entire time as well. But I spent 12 of 17 years going to school.
what's super impactful about what you just said is that you've been advising commanders now your whole time in the Army as a chaplain. And you've been standing on the left, the right, helping command sergeant majors, helping company commanders and first sergeants, helping soldiers make decisions, helping soldiers with their family decisions. This is where all those years being an NCO, growing up as a Ranger, going to school, when people think it's just a captain or that's just chaplain, it's not the same when they've got that much life experience. You're almost like a second commander. You're like in between, with the field grades, you've got way more education. You got way more experience in life. You got way more experience now in the Army. You've seen all of these things. When you first became that chaplain, you first get back into the Army, how did that meet your expectations? What was the experience like coming back now?
So listen, man, I will tell you that when I came back in the Army, I felt like I found a pair of blue jeans from my high school days that still fit me, tailor fit me, and were as comfortable as pajamas. I love the Army. If I had 2 lives to live, I would be a soldier again. When you were talking there, it prompted a memory of me. I'm gonna do an invocation for a good friend of mine. You may know him, I'm not sure. He's gonna promote to 06 here in August. His name is Andy Pesture. Andy was a PL in 275. Andy was a company commander at 6th RTB in 2010 when I was the chaplain there. Andy and I are great friends. Andy is a great human being. He's a FAO now. And I walked out of the headquarters one day, and Andy said something to me about thanking me for helping him and his wife Toby through some times that they were there. And he said something about, I'm really glad that you're our chaplain. And I said, Andy, I love being a chaplain so much. I wish I had not waited so long to come back in the Army to be a chaplain. I wish I came back as soon as I finished my Master of Divinity. And he said, man, I hope that you'll take this, the right way. He said, but what makes you such a valuable asset to us captains, because I was a captain then, is he said, you're more than a decade older than all of us. And you have more than a decade of marital experience than all of us. And your kids are older than our kids. And he said, if you were the same age as me, it would be hard for me to trust your counsel. He said, but I look at you and I think that guy's got some age and some wisdom, so I can trust him. And I never forgot that. And so I stopped lamenting about not coming back sooner and thanked God for the time of seasoning. I was like Moses. He put Moses in the desert for 40 years. Like, what the heck, 40 years? And then called him to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt, right? Well, my time in the desert was much like Moses. This was God's preparing me to come back in the Army, to be a chaplain.
Wow. I'm not even 100% sure where to go after that with you talking about Moses and like being in, being in the desert for 40 years. I thought you were going to have a story of like being in desert phase for 6 months, like
yeah,
that,
it felt like it.
It did feel like 6 months, right? When we were going through, and I felt the same way when I first met you in the 173rd, was because I had grown up. I didn't do as many years before from the time I came in the Army until the time I became a second lieutenant. But I did have those years. I did have a decade on most of the people that I grew up as a second lieutenant with, right? I already had the 2 boys. I had already been married for a lot longer. Most of my lieutenant friends were not married. And so I was able to give a lot of advice or recommendations or help them with those things. And it really drove me. And it's only driven me even more in the Army is the ability to help people. But when I met you, you had that on me. Like you had that same, like you were one of those people that I could tell people were looking at as, I want him on my team. I want to hear what he's got to say. And I want to be around him. I want to be in the rooms that he's in so that if he talks, I can hear what he has to say. But when I got to meet you in the 173rd in Vicenza that first time, when you were with Colonel Brown, I was over in First Rock, we were together. there was some things that you had been doing for those years from the time you came back in the Army until you got to First Rock. Can you refresh us on what you did from what kind of units? You said you did ROTB, but I know a lot of those units are not just your basic units.
Yeah. So I was really blessed. I got to go to my first assignment was to 3rd Psychological Operations Battalion in USASOC at Fort Bragg, and I only spent a year there. I got an opportunity to go to RASP in 2010, in March of 2010, and I will tell you, Matt, I listened to your podcast today, and we have got such a similar parallel story. I don't know if you know this or not. I went to RASP in 2010. I was supposed to go to 2nd Ranger Battalion. I was convinced this was it. God has called me back in the Army to be a chaplain, and I'm going to go back to Ranger Regiment, and I'm going to be a chaplain at 2nd Ranger Battalion. I went to RASP, and I performed exceptionally well. I appeared very high in my class. I was there with Brandon Mino. He was my roommate. He became the fire support officer for regiment. I mean, RASP was awesome. And I failed the board, and I was a non-select, and it broke my heart. I was a grown man, and I literally cried all the way home from my drive from Fort Benning to Fort Bragg. I cried like a baby, like I'd had a death in my family, questioning, have I messed up by coming back in the Army? Did I miss God's call or direction on me? Why would this happen? And Scott Kelly, Colonel retired Scott Kelly now, was in another special unit at the time, was a friend and a colleague of mine. And when I got back, he saw me at the field. Our kids were playing soccer together. He goes, Charlie, how did it go? You going to the 2nd Ranger, Dad? I said, man, brother, I failed the board. I was a non-select. And he said, man, that's such a good providence of God for you, man. And I remember it was like someone punched me in the stomach. And I said, what? And he said, you need something like that as a chaplain so you can relate to soldiers better. And I said, dude, that might be true, but now is not the time to tell me that. And I went home. I went back home, right? I had to move because everyone was certain Charlie's going to Ranger Regiment. They already had another guy, a retired chaplain named Paul Lynn, was in my office when I got back. So I moved to 6 RTB. I got down to 6 RTB. Matt Seifert was battalion commander down there. Guy Eller was the CS.
Matt Seifert was my platoon leader. He was my first platoon leader in Charlie 175 when I first got there in 1995, when I first showed up. Matt Seifert, talk about small world.
Yeah, man, that big old Arkansas, corn-fed Bubba, right? So I got to 6 RTB, and I met Matt Meyer there. You know Matt. And Battle of Wanat, I was there with Andy Pester. I was there with this group of guys that were just phenomenal. But I was still kind of like, what the heck, man? Did 2 years there. It was phenomenal. And it was like, I told everyone it was like pasture in the little house on the prairie, because I lived on the Ranger camp. There was about 26 or 27 houses. 90% of them came to my little chapel service outside there in Neely Chapel, named after the battalion commander that was killed in the accident. And then from there, I just moved across the compound to 7th Special Forces Group. So I was chaplain there at 4th Battalion, 7th Group. Did 2 tours in Afghanistan with them. Had a phenomenal experience there. And then I moved to the 173rd, where I got to meet you. You and I in process together. We were in the hotel together. I remember meeting you and thinking, that is the happiest field grade infantry officer I've ever met. I've never met a field grade infantry officer that smiles as much as Major Leclerc. I came back to the hotel room. I still remember the day I met you. We were getting coffee together at that little coffee machine. And I went back to the hotel and I told Patty, I said, I just met this major that's in process, and I hope he's coming to 2nd Battalion.
Oh, and, I think I was.
So we did.
I think I was supposed to go to 2nd Battalion. I was told I was going to 2nd Battalion. Colonel Brown told me I was going to 2nd Battalion, and then I don't know how. I don't know if I got an email. I don't know how it worked out, but I think I got to the hotel, and they were like, "Hey, you're going to go to 1st Battalion." Matt Work just left. I went to an empty office in First Rock, and as I always love to say, God's got a plan for all of us. Charlie, I had just been when I showed up to the 173rd. I had just had the same moment for me, which was when I was told I was not picked to go back to the Ranger Regiment as a field grade. Nobody should have these expectations that of course you're going to get picked. Nobody should have those, and nobody did. But when you pray about things and people tell you about things, and you start to you start to say, I'm focused, this is the direction I'm going to go, you start to believe those things, and you have to, right? In order to be like the best of the best on the best golfers in the world, the best athletes in the world, the best professionals in the world, they have to believe it before it can happen, right? And so when I was not picked to go back there, it broke my foundation. It made me question everything that I had done up until that point. Had I done all the wrong things? I mean, for example, they were like, why would we pick you? You haven't even done a master's degree. And I said, I thought being a Ranger Company commander was more important than going out and getting a master's degree. Well, now you should go get a master's degree and then try again. It broke me. It made me wonder why I had done, had committed to so many of these things. But then when I showed up to the ones, once I Christy always does this to me. She says, you get about 24 hours. You get about 24, maybe I'll give you 36. You get about 24 hours to feel sorry for yourself, and I won't mess with you or anything like that. Go do whatever you want to do. But then come 48 hours from now, get back up on the horse and let's go. And she's done that for me a few times now, more than a few times over the course of my career. But that's what our family does now. You get about 24 hours to feel sorry for yourself, and then it's time to get back on and be the happiest person in the world. And when I found out I was going to 173rd, I was the happiest person in the world because everybody wanted to be there.
The 173rd, I tell everyone the 173rd is a cult. My name's Jim Jones. Listen, I don't just drink the Kool-Aid, baby. I make it. So I have, I never got another chance to go back to regiment, and I really thought that I would. But I have truly come, just like what you said in your podcast about your experience. I wouldn't trade my path for anything because of the people that I got to serve with and meet and the units that I've been to. I tell people all the time, if I was drinking a beer in a VFW when I retired here at some point, people ask when I'm going to retire. I tell them I'm going from active duty to Social Security. So it's coming quick. I said, if I was drinking a beer in a VFW and a bunch of vets was like, hey, what units have you served in? And I listed the units that I've served in, someone would call me a liar. They would say, there's no way you served in all of those units. You could not have served in Ranger Regiment, Ranger School, Drill Sergeant, LURS, 7th Group, 3rd Group, 173rd, 10th Mountain Division, and then where I'm at now. But I have. And it's all because of the smiling providence of God and because his plan is better than my plan.
Wow. I love that. What I want to do now is I want to get into like the part of the conversation that both of us have wanted to talk about the most. And that is the impacts that positive leadership and negative leadership can have on people in the Army. The good ones, the how much of an effect it has on us. But before I do, I wanted to, you made a post the other day, and it might have been a couple weeks ago, but I went back to it and I wrote down a few of the things that you had said in it, because when you said it, it had a huge impact on me. Not only did it have an impact on me because I'm absolutely fascinated and passionate with anything that has to do with leadership, inspirational leadership. Heck, that's what this whole podcast is about, is helping figure out what drives people to serve, right? That's what my passion is for. And when I saw what you wrote, I said, oh my God, like I've known Charlie, but like, this is what we need to talk about. And so I'll just kind of, I won't read the whole thing, but I'll read it. And it was a picture of you and Todd Brown on a helicopter. And you said, he's one of my best friends and maybe the best leader I've ever worked for. Then you said, leadership or the lack thereof it is the number one reason why soldiers who have huge potential are leaving the Army after their initial obligation. If the only power and influence that you have is your rank or your position, then you are a shitty leader. I know 100 leaders that people would pay for their own PCS to get away from. Be better, do better, and we will keep the best. Otherwise, we will be left with a lot of people that stay because they have no other options.
Yeah.
And I read it about 5 times that day when you said it, and it had a huge impact on me. I think I told you that when I saw it, how much of an impact that had on me, because I think what you said there, the feeling in there, we're all feeling. We've all had great leaders that we would do anything to be around, and we've all worked for people that we would have given anything to get away from and never have to deal with or be around again. I know I just spit out a lot of different things. What drove you to make that post or say those things in the first place?
So, like you, I'm in a unique position that I have a son that's in the Army. He went to West Point. He was class of 2020. He's an infantry officer in the 82nd. And a son-in-law who was a classmate of his, that's a 64 pilot, who worked for Matt Work. Matt retired out of this position there at Knox. So my son-in-law is writing code at Knox. And so he and my daughter live there in Louisville. And so I get a unique perspective as a father and a father-in-law of how people in their circles influence. And then I see it as well as a chaplain. I get a unique perspective in the sense I get to see how certain leaders talk to subordinates. And I had relayed to me what should be a very respected leader had said to someone who had a failure at SFAS. And I had relayed to me what was communicated to them. And it infuriated me because, my goodness, man, I've had a failure. You've had a failure. If you haven't failed at something in the Army, then you haven't tried enough hard things. If you haven't found out where your breaking point is, then you haven't pushed yourself. And when someone fails, but they're trying to do something that's greater than them, we don't need leaders that rejoice in their failure. We need leaders that encourage them and say, hey, man, you didn't make it this time. It doesn't mean you won't make it next time. We have people in the Army that are unique in our service. They're uniquely qualified. And then they volunteer to join something where they give up a great deal of their rights and where they're willing to, in a moment's notice, go to somewhere else in the world and put their lives at risk. I think that we should celebrate that and encourage instead of use our positions to belittle or to downgrade or to rejoice at someone's failure. I tell soldiers when they're going to go and do certain things, whether it's Ranger School or Jump Master School or SFAS, what I'll tell them is that if you're not successful, it's not failure unless you don't go back. It's just delayed gratification. Most people don't successfully complete some of these things. When I went to Jump Master School, I went with over 100 people in my class, and I was fortunate enough by God's grace to get through the first time. But I think only 30 some of us graduated, and most of those were repeats. I tell folks all the time, if you fail at Jump Master School, go back immediately while it's fresh. You'll just go right through it because it'll be all the stress will be off you. And I know more Jump Masters that went to Jump Master School twice than I knew. Same with Ranger School. When I was a chaplain at Ranger School, we have guys that would recycle Florida phase, and it's only 18 days in Florida phase. And we'd have guys that would want to LOM, want to quit. And I would say, dude, you can't quit, man. You're 18 days away from your tab. But I failed. You haven't failed. It's delayed gratification. When you go to SFAS, if you don't get through SFAS, whether you're an officer or an NCO, if you don't get through, then go back. And if you can't go back, then go do something else. But don't look at it as it's terminal failure and that you'll never be good at anything again. I like to tell folks all the time that, when someone's standing on the podium at the Olympics and they put a gold medal around their neck and they put a camera in front of their face and they say, what got you here? You know what you've never heard anyone say? Oh, it was easy. I just coasted. No one's more surprised that I'm here than me because I didn't do much to get here. I'm surprised how easy it was. You don't ever hear that. What they talk about is the sacrifices that they made to get there, the failures, the attempts and failures, the hard work, the making next to no money, sleeping in their car. There is nothing in life that is valuable that is easy. If you just want easy, you'll never have anything that you value. And so when I value the leaders in the Army that see their young subordinates that are trying to do something bigger than themselves, and when they fail, they don't applaud their failure or remind them that they're a failure. That's when it's time to use your position and your experience and your age and your influence to take a 20-something-year-old American service member and say to them, hey, soldier, it's going to be okay. I know you're brokenhearted. We're going to find another hill. We're going to find another challenge for you. Not tell them, I knew you wouldn't make it. Oh, you're never going to make it in anything.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you suck. I can't believe that you thought you could do. Those are all the kinds of things that I've heard and seen. It infuriates me.
Mm-hmm.
It just infuriates me. The number one determining factor on whether a first term service member will stay or get out is on the leadership of influence that they have. Whenever Colonel Klepper came in to be the commander at the 2503, I love Mike Klepper. He's like a daggone 1,500-pound silverback gorilla. You're just glad he's on your team. And I appreciate the fact that he said to me one day, he was like, "Hey, do you have any advice for me, old man? I've always been older than my commanders, so I wear the term old man proudly. You got any advice for me, old man?" And I said, the only advice I'd give to you is, I said, I'd say two things to you. Number one is you are a fresh rider, but your horse has been running. So don't forget that. You're coming in here fresh. You've had a break. You've been waiting your whole life to get on the horse as the battalion commander. But don't forget that your horse has been running. So don't be afraid to let it spend a little bit of time in the barn from time to time because it needs to. Because the previous rider was riding it hard too, which was Todd Brown. I said the second thing is I would say is this, is that when you look in the mirror in the morning, you probably just see Mike Klepper. Maybe you see Cadet Klepper, maybe you see Lieutenant Klepper or Captain Klepper. I said, but everyone in this building sees the airborne commander of an infantry assault battalion who holds their future in his hand. So if you get upset and you think you're at a 3 or a 4, your subordinates hear you at a 5 or a 6. So mitigate your emotion the best that you can, because you will unintentionally, you will teach your subordinates to hide their failure from you if they don't believe they can trust you with failure. And I've told multiple leaders that, and some hear it and they get it, and others don't. And I don't know if it's that they don't realize it or they don't care. What makes me passionate is I love seeing leaders who encourage, who underwrite failure, who help people to be successful. And it infuriates me when I see leaders who use their rank or their position to bully and belittle or to take advantage. And I've seen great examples of both in operational leadership and even in my own corps, even in my own chaplain.
Yeah. What are some of the common things that the positive people are doing? It's hard because a lot of times we're like, I don't know what I was doing. I was just doing my best. But when people see it, they can point it out for you. So what was the Todd Browns doing? What was the Mike Kleppers doing of the world? What was the Matt Seifert, doing of the world? What are the things that those inspirational people, the people that you would pay for, your own PCS in order to go serve with those people again? And then you hope that your kids, when they go serve, that they get to serve with people like them or for them or people that they raised, through our Army.
Yeah.
What are the most common things?
Yeah, you said it. You said it yourself on yours. They don't remember what you say. They remember how you made them feel. That's it. It's inspirational leadership that makes someone feel like they're on the team. It's not this juvenile cliques. It isn't this you're not cool enough or you don't look like us. It's the kind of leader that values everyone on their team for what they bring to the table. It's getting rid of the parochialism, the division. I remember when I worked with Colonel Brown, I remember that the men and the women in his battalion, when they would see him out, they would literally deviate where they were going to just cross his path and speak to him. And it didn't matter who they were. General Brown had a smile on his face. He was always like, "What's up, Airborne?" And I would just see soldiers smile when he would say that. It's the inspirational leadership that makes you feel like you are a valued member of that team. And that can be just said so easily, right? But we've all know who it is. We know who it is that when they see you, they have a kind word to say to you. I saw them, Lieutenant Colonel Brown, deal with failure and punish soldiers for wrongdoing. But he did it with dignity and respect. And soldiers never felt like they were bullied or picked on. They were never belittled. He would say what they had done wrong, and he would say what the consequence was, and they would almost leave thanking him, realizing that they had messed up and what they had done deserved punishment. There's a huge difference between that and the leader that sees their rank and their position giving them the ability to just belittle people. I had a command sergeant major once that he spoke to the officers like to the field grades. He spoke to the field grades in such a way that was shocking to me. I remember watching him speak to our intel officer, a major at the time. And I remember standing there watching it, and I remember realizing, like telling myself, Charlie, fix your face, fix your face, fix your face. Because I just couldn't believe the way that he was speaking to them. And at one point, when he was leaving the organization, he tugged on his rank and he said, I have more command time than anyone in this division. And then he said, I put the command in command sergeant major. And I thought to myself, that is absolutely the worst example of that rank and position that I may have seen in the Army.
Wow.
That's not, you're not there for that, man. I mean, the two people I say in the Army, the two people that soldiers should know that they can trust to resolve problems and to help them, two people in every organization they should be able to go to, the sergeant major and the chaplain. Sergeant majors and chaplains, I tell folks, I just came back from Iraq. When I am processed over there, I said, hey, I'm the command chaplain here. I'm a lieutenant colonel in the Army. I'm the command chaplain. But here's what you got to know. I'm in the Army for one purpose and one purpose only: customer service. That's my job, is customer service. So you are never a burden to me. You never inconvenience me, regardless of what time of day or night it is, regardless of what I'm doing, because I'm not an infantry officer that's leading troops into combat. I'm not the commander that's making decisions about operations. I am a chaplain, and I exist for you. I think command sergeant majors are the same way. They've reached the point in the Army where they're in the customer service business. They're there to hold people accountable to standards, but they're also there to help soldiers resolve problems.
I've always had a special relationship at every organization, that I've been a part of as an officer with our chaplains. I think it all started because when I was a second lieutenant in the 82nd Airborne, our first chaplain was Dan Knight.
Now, I know Danny Knight.
Everybody knows Dan Knight, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's from his time as a enlisted guy at Green Beret to a Ranger officer to a chaplain, so everybody during those years, we're showing our age if we say we all know Dan Knight. The young folks don't know Dan Knight. But Dan was our chaplain in Fallujah in the 1st of the 505th in One Panther. And so I had the legendary Dan Knight, and I'll never forget right before we were coming home, and he gave us like the reintegration, training. And he was like, hey, you're going to go home and you've seen all these hard things and these terrible things that have been going on over here. But when you get home, they're going to have like minor things going on in their life. And you're going to need to make it a big deal, because you can't come home and say like, oh, is anybody's leg got blown off? Did anybody get shot? No. Well, then it ain't that big of a deal. But Dan Knight was our first chaplain. And then as soon as we showed up, you were like, how in the world could this new chaplain fill the shoes of Dan Knight? And it was Phil Kramer.
Oh my goodness.
And like Phil Kramer comes in and he was like, I don't know how I'm going to fill the shoes of Dan Knight, but I'm going to do my absolute best. Me and him had a relationship just like me and you did instantly. Like instantly, me and Phil Kramer got along. And I was a jump master. I remember him going to jump master school and passing. I remember him passing Ranger school, getting his advice. He asked for some advice on that. And then I wish someday you'll get Phil Kramer to tell the story about us being on a plane. And I was like, Phil, how come you can trust me or something like that? And he's like, I remember on that plane, you were the jump master. And we got on and the plane took off. And I was all nervous because I was like 5 jump and it was like my 6th first jump in the 82nd Airborne Division. And I look over and there's this lieutenant and he's sitting there with his head kicked back and his helmet, mouth wide open, and he was sawing logs asleep. And I was like, man, what do I got to be nervous about if this guy's just sitting over here is like sleeping on the plane? And he goes, and I said, I'm just going to be on his hip and I'm going to follow him around. And I said, Phil, that's the best compliment I could ever get. And then because of that, I was always just trying not to let those kind of people down. I would never let him down because he was counting on me to do the right thing or act the right way. Still doesn't mean I would go to sleep. We all go to sleep when we get on that plane, right? And you're going to fly around for a bunch of hours. We've heard it so many times, like it's about how people feel. It's about how you make people feel. They won't remember all the things that you say and all the pieces of paper that you put up on the wall, but they will remember the way they felt when they were in your presence. You've given us a lot of awesome examples about positive and negative, and I'm sure you'll still have more as we keep going. But now I want to start talking about some of your advice for those people as they show up to their first organization, as they show up to their second or third organization, and they're trying to figure out how to be that leader. Like they're practicing, right? They're not the leader. They're not the battalion commander or the command sergeant major, but maybe they hope to be there someday, or they hope that they could maybe get there. What do you got to say to that audience of people that are just starting to figure out whether or not they have what it takes to be a leader in our Army?
So I read John Maxwell's book years ago, 21 Laws of Leadership, and he tells a story about a guy that was visiting this small town in France, and he sits down to an old man on a bench, and they're talking about the town, and he says, "Hey, if any great leader has been born in this town?" And the old man said, "Nope, just babies." And his point was that leaders aren't born, they're made. And so I believe that. I believe that anybody can be made into a better leader. Some people have got more, some people are a little bit more gifted with oratory skills or the way that they're analytical or whatever. But leadership is caught more than it's taught. We have a tendency to emulate those that we respect. When I was a drill sergeant, I knew that I had influence on my soldiers when I could hear them imitating me or mocking me in the barracks. Other drill sergeants would get angry about it. I took it as a badge of honor because it meant that I was having an impact on them and they were trying to walk and talk and act like I was, right? What I tell folks when you're coming into a unit is, first and foremost, is that figure out the organization and figure out what you can do to make it better. And most importantly, love the one that you're with. The best unit that you're in is the one that you're in. It can't be the one that you came from, and it can't be the one that you're going to. It's the one that you're in. And if it's not the best unit that you've been in, what are you doing to make it the best unit? I mean, you can curse the darkness or you can light a candle. So when you get somewhere, first and foremost, love where you are. Secondly, figure out what you can do to make it better. We can all make everything better. We can always improve our foxhole. Find out who's doing it right and who's doing it well, and follow them and befriend them and spend time with them and listen and take advice. And then look for the people in your organization that need some encouragement and be an encourager. Most people in life have not been overly encouraged. When we have a failure in our life, we've all had people who privately or publicly applauded our failure. We don't typically have a lot of people who encourage us. If you want to be the kind of leader that your men and women will remember, if there's one thing that you get good at, be an encourager. People need encouragement. I don't mean don't blow smoke up someone's ass, or don't bloviate, or don't say something that is disingenuous or isn't genuine, but just be the kind of person that sees the good in someone and encourages them to be better. And you start doing that as a young leader. The funny thing is that by the time you become an 05 in the Army or an 06 in the Army, you're not recreating yourself. You're not going to change what got you there. What got you to that command select position was the previous years of what you did. That's what got you there. So if you are a young leader in the military right now and you're seeing traits in yourself that you don't necessarily like, the time to fix that is now. Because if you don't, you're not going to fix it when you're a 40-year-old battalion commander. That's going to be who you are. And you're going to think that's what got you there. And it may have gotten you there, but everyone has a ceiling. And you may find that that is your ceiling, because ultimately, I think that our Army is looking for men and women who can inspire others to do things that are unthinkable. The other day, Seth said to me, Seth said to me, it's kind of frustrating to me right now in the Army that if the Army wants me to train my paratroopers to be willing to deploy on a moment's notice to somewhere in the world to do trench warfare in MOP level 4. But whenever they do some things and say some things that a 20-year-old kid will say or do, we want to drop the hammer on them instead of finding creative ways to train them and correct them. And I said to him, you don't sound much like a Gen Zer. You sound like a Gen Xer. Oh, that's because you were raised by a Gen Xer.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
I said, he's thinking about, he's looking at getting out of the Army, either going to the PA program in the Army or getting out and going to med school. And I have said over and over, I wish that he could stay and be an infantry officer, because I think that he is an inspiring leader who just genuinely cares for his soldiers. What would I say to you when you show up? I would say, love the one that you're with. It's okay to be proud of where you've come from. It's okay to anticipate where you're going, but love where you are right now and make the people around you think they're in the best unit in the Army, and find an area where you can make where you are right now a little bit better. That's what I would say.
The next group of people is parents of people that are coming into the Army. You have a special, just like I do, we're still young enough and healthy enough to be serving on active duty with our kids coming in. But there's a lot of people out there that are listening right now that are out of the Army, but their kids are considering the military. Their kids or their nephews are, and they say, hey, ask Uncle Charlie. Ask Uncle Matt.
Yeah.
He was in the Army for a long time. He'll know.
Yeah.
What do you have advice for those parents that are asking you about their kids maybe serving in the Army?
This is what I tell them. I'm not on. I know this is going to be on audio, not on camera. So if you can imagine, my hand is held flat in front of me at about my chin. I tell them this: the Army will if you come in the Army, you come in the military and you serve well, the Army puts your life on an upward trajectory, and it will change your life, and it could change the generations of your family's name. That's what I tell them. This is the most forgiving organization you'll ever work for. The Army underwrites failure. You can come in the Army and have failures, and you can recover. Now, there's catastrophic failures without a doubt. But for the most part, this is an organization that's going to teach you discipline. It's going to show you what a team is. You're going to travel to places you would otherwise never get to travel. You're going to do the kinds of things. You can, the old adage when I came in was be all you can be. You can be whatever you want to be in the Army. You want to be an airborne ranger? You can be an airborne ranger. You want to be a Green Beret? You want to be a cyber warfare? You want to fly drones? You want to fly helicopters? I'm all about it. I mean, I tell folks that the Army is it's a great place for you to do 3 or 4 years. And then if you do 20 or 30, great. But you don't have to do 20 or 30. Come in and do 2 or 3 years. The Army will give you opportunities to do things in life that may literally change a generation. I'm sitting here today as a chaplain, lieutenant colonel in the Army with a doctorate degree. I came from a family that couldn't probably spell the word high school. I graduated from high school in my class, like 4th in my class, from the bottom. I got a degree just to get in the Army. I wanted to get a good enough degree, the GED. My recruiter said, you're so close to getting your high school diploma, you're going to get a diploma because you're going to need that for the rest of your life. I was glad that he did that. But I didn't think that I would ever go to college. I couldn't spell college. I didn't think I'd ever go to college. I came in the Army. I did 8 years. Jesus Christ turned my life upside down. I got out of the Army and I went to college, and I graduated #1 in my class. I came home from college. I came home from school the first day of school with a syllabus. I didn't know what the word was. I had to ask my wife, what is this word that's silly bus? She was like, it's syllabus, moron. And this is what it is. I had this stack of books on the table, and I sat there and I was looking at those books, and I was looking at those books like a calf looks at a new gate. And she said to me, what is wrong with you? And I said, I have to read these books in this first semester of school. She said, and what's the problem? I said, that's more than I've read in my life combined. And my wife, listen, I am married. I'm married to Superwoman. My wife said to me, are you a Ranger or not? I said, well, I'm not anymore. She said, I thought you could never not be one. I was like, where are you getting at? She was like, the Army has taught you discipline, and the Army has taught you endurance. Now just apply it at this discipline in your life. You're going to be just fine. And I did. I was. And I worked my tail off. I did 3.5 years, 4 years of college in 3.5 years. What I tell folks, parents say to me, hey, Charlie, my kid's thinking about joining the Army. What should they do? I say, hey, I think the Army is a great place to serve. Is it perfect? By no means. Is it what it used to be? No. In some ways, it's better. In some ways, I think we could go back to the way it was. But I'll tell you what, it's not a bad thing. Selfless service, serving your country. You will forever be a veteran. When you have an honorable discharge hanging on your wall, you will forever be proud of what you've done. Right now, this weekend, right now, Echo Company at the my Long Range Surveillance First Association is having their annual reunion right now in Missouri. Those guys are sending me pictures every night. They're blowing me up. Why aren't you here? Why aren't you here? Most of those guys did 3 or 4 years in the Army and got out. And they've gone on to do great things in life. But you know what they're most proud of? The 3 or 4 years they did in the Army as a paratrooper in a long range reconnaissance surveillance company. And just know this, it's going to be some of the best days and some of the worst days. You're going to have friends that you're going to have that are closer than family members that you have right now. I'm all about it, brother. I could be a recruiting troop commander right now.
It's like the tale of two cities. It was the best of times and it was the worst of times.
Yeah.
The Army is absolutely the best of times and the worst of times, all bottled up into one. Earlier, about 45 minutes ago, you said, about the foundation of our adult life was growing up in the Ranger Regiment. And I'm kind of going all the way back to the foundation of our adult life. And you're like, well, how could something that you learned as a private and as a sergeant, right, as a young NCO, and then maybe in my case as a second lieutenant, it was just the same things at scale. What made you successful when you those first couple of years in the Army that are making you successful now? I'd love for you to share, some of those things that have allowed you to live the life that you live right now. You're super healthy. You run more marathons than people have ever, combined, right? You're out there kicking my ass on these number of miles every day, miles over the month, miles over the year. I think you just ran, an average of 5 miles a day is what it was, 365.
Oh, average of 6.5 miles a day. And right now I'm on track for about 2030 this year. I did 250 the last 2 months in a row. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've been living this life, your health, your like very, very similar to mine. My four biggest priorities in this world: my health, number one, my family, my relationships with people in this world, and then my contribution. Those are my big four, and I know they fit very, very close to yours. But what are some of those things that you learned that are the same daily habits, the systems and the routines that you and your family kind of go through, you and Patty go through on a weekly basis so that you can do, and I'm not going to say your age on the net, right? But everybody knows it's unbelievable how healthy and how motivated you are. Because it's like freaking 10 o'clock back where you are right now, right? And how do you maintain this level of energy, positivity, and such going forward? What are some of those systems that those people, what are those things that have been carrying on for the rest of your life that have allowed you to live the life that you're living right now?
So I talk when I do a little speech at leadership, I talk about what I was looking for when I joined the Army. And I was looking to be part of something that I could be proud of and part of something that'd be proud to have me as a part of it. And I still remember my first day after RIP. We were sitting in a coliseum, or we were sitting in a classroom, and the first battalion commander for 375 came in, William C. Old III. The guy looked like a bronze god. He was tan, he was slick bald headed, he was chewing bubble gum. He was a Vietnam vet, CIB, Master Rated Jump Master, Ranger Tab. His sleeves are rolled up on his biceps. He'd probably been doing curls for an hour if we came in there to talk to us. And he came in there and he walked back and forth on that stage, and he told us what it meant to be a United States Army Airborne Ranger. He talked about the recent invasion of Grenada, which had just happened about 8 months prior to that. He talked about Vietnam. He talked about the Second Ranger Battalion, the walls. Today's the remembrance of Normandy, right? And he talked about that, and then he pointed his finger at us and he said, "Now you are part of that community. You are part of that history. What are you going to write? What are we going to write about your contribution here?" I was 17 years old sitting there. Maybe had just turned 18. And I was sitting there and I thought to myself, I would follow this dude to hell right now with a water pistol and spit. I don't even know where we're going, but if he said we're going, I would follow him. An inspirational leader. And then what I realized really quickly is that Rip had gotten me there, but it wasn't going to keep me there. That I was going to have to be physically fit, and I was going to have to be morally straight, and I was going to have courage to do things that I was afraid of doing if I was going to stay there. And the foundation of fitness was laid into my soul there. I wasn't the fastest or the best or the strongest when I got there. I was just mediocre when I got there. I got there like everybody else, like the cows did. But I realized very quickly if I was going to be successful in this place called Third Range Battalion, I was going to have to put more work in than anybody else was. And so I did. And I came across some things that I was terrified of. I wasn't all that wild about heights. I remember we were doing the log walk rope drops and spinner traverse water obstacle confidence test, and as a battalion event, and it was wintertime. And my team leader, Ian Kaufhold, who was 275 grenade raider, he's up at the top with the pulley, and didn't have any of the safety stuff it has now. I was soaking wet, I was shivering, and I had to hold this pulley, and we're going to go down. I got to go down the 75-foot cable, and I said, Sergeant Kaufhold, I'm not sure I can hold on to the pulley, and he said, get off my platform, Ranger Shields, and I said, but I'm not sure if I can hold on the pulley, and he said, well, you can either go down the pulley or I'm going to throw you off this platform. It's your choice. And I, left off that platform. And of course, I did it, right? What growing up in Ranger Battalion as a young Ranger back in the 80s did for me was it put a sense of like, there isn't anything that I can't do. And it also gave me a sense of discipline. I know that you think just like this. I measure every run that I do, not by my heart rate. I do it by the Ranger standard. Was that the Ranger standard? Now, I don't run every run at a sub-8 pace now, but everything that I do when I'm doing for competition, I ask myself, am I holding the Ranger standard? Am I still living the Ranger creed? And I don't know, some folks may think it's corny for a dude that's about to be 58 years old to still be talking about the Ranger standard or the Ranger creed. But I believe that, and it's influenced my life. I've been on this new kick recently. I was just downrange and I was talking to some guys. They were asking about an ultra marathon that I've signed up to run here soon. And they said, "Dang, Chap, you're getting kind of old. Do you think that running's hurting how's your joints hanging up?" And I said, "Dude, you bought into a lie." I said, "Do you not understand that God has made you as an apex predator?" I said, "You ever been to a zoo?" "Well, yes, sir." I said, "What's in the zoo?" "What do you mean?" I said, "I'll tell you what's in the zoo. Lions and tigers and bears." "That's right. But we're not in the zoo because we're the true apex predator, brother." I said, when God created us, he created us to move. Don't buy into this idea that moving is going to somehow break you down. Motion is lotion, man. I said, most people have never even seen what they're capable of. You are uniquely made by God. You are designed by him in his image. You are an apex predator, and you can do way more than you think that you can. And that's how I live my life, man. I want to defy the odds. I want to do as much as I can. I've yet to find out, where is my breaking point? How far can I go? When I retire from the Army in about 2.5 years, my goal is to run a marathon on every continent in the world, to include Antarctica. I'm trying to run 50 marathons in 50 states now, because that's just the way that I think that I don't know, I love doing hard stuff. And I love seeing what am I capable of and what has God designed me to do. And I don't want to be that guy that retires and falls apart and gains 50 pounds. I want to go into death when it's done, like a burned out, nothing left. Like, heck yeah, it was time to go because I put it all on the table, nothing in reserve.
Yeah. I love how you talked mostly about your health. You talked mostly about, fitness. As people get a little bit older, as people get more senior in the military, we talk about it a little bit less sometimes. Some folks do, because I think that our health is the greatest thing that we can do for our soldiers. It's the greatest thing we can do for our family. When people say, like, how are you able to be optimistic? Because I'm healthy. Because I'm so grateful for the fact that I can get out there and I can run and I can exercise. Everybody feels better when they've done a little bit of exercise and their brain is clicking. and they're out
Yeah.
there. And so that's why we kind of, we keep doing that. You said that you wanted to be a part of the team. You, for me, have always been one of those people that, you know, I want to be on that team. I want to be on a part of the team that you've been a part of, that I know I can trust a team that you're on or that you're around or the people that you are influencing. I know the people that you're serving right now. We're super close. I'm super close with some of those folks, and they would say the exact same thing about you. So I really appreciate you taking some time to, you know, to put this out on the air, to put this out so some folks can learn the things that I and some of the other people in the Army have been super blessed to have you around on our left and right, and to have learned from you firsthand. But now they can learn a little bit from you, you know, secondhand, and through this. So I really appreciate you taking some time to do this for us. And I'd love for you to kind of wrap it up with the last couple things that we might not have had a chance to talk about.
Yeah, I guess what I would like to say, if I could speak to some leaders out there in the Army, regardless of what your rank or title or position is, I would say just don't forget that the young men and women in formation, in your formation, they're someone's son or daughter, they're someone's husband or wife. They have been on loan to us in the Army, and there are people out there that think that the moon and the sun rise and set in them. Treat them with dignity and respect. Be an encourager. When they have failure, figure it out. I find that when I've had people that work with me or for me that they don't do what I've wanted them to do, I ask three questions. Do they know how? Are they able? And are they willing? And if they don't know how, then that's on me. My job is to teach them how. If they're not able, that's on me. My job is to help prepare them to be able. It's to make them a little bit better with realistic, known expectations. And if they're unwilling, and they're truly unwilling, then my job is to help them to find a different career in life, to not serve in uniform. And that's okay. And even when people fail in serving in the Army, I was in 10th Mountain Division, and I had a young soldier that had popped hot on a urinalysis. And as bad as that is, he was going to be separated, but he was being told by his chain of command at the time that he was going to get court-martialed. He was going to go to Fort Leavenworth because he popped out on a urinalysis. Now, you and I both know that isn't true at all. But he didn't know that because he was 19 years old, and he went AWOL. And when he came back, they wanted me to come and see him. And he was like, "Sir, I just don't want to go to Fort Leavenworth." And I said, "For what?" And he said, "Because I smoked marijuana." And I said, "Well, why would you go to Fort Leavenworth for that?" "Well, my command was telling me that they're going to put me in prison for that." And I went and saw the command, and they were like, "Oh, come on, sir. We were just busting his chops." Man, don't forget, those kids believe you. When they see chevrons on your chest, or they see oak leaves on you, or an animal on your chest like you've got, when they see that and you say that stuff, they believe it. Now, I'm not talking about coddling or excusing bad behavior. Some things that we do have consequences to them. But remember that they are somebody's everything. So treat them with dignity and respect. Assume the best in them. Try to make them better. If you want to be remembered as the kind of leader that people wanted to work for, then be the kind of leader that people want to work for. If you want to be remembered as being a hard ass and an asshole, then just be a hard ass and an asshole. And you'll find that when people see you, they'll find a different route to take instead of saying hi to you or checking on you or hearing how you're doing. I want to be the kind of person that people, when they mention my name, they say, Chaplain Shields loved God. Chaplain Shields loved his family. And Chaplain Shields was on a different level physically. I don't know where it came from, but that old man could run with the 20-year-olds. I want to have the heart of a lion. I want to be known as a warrior priest. And I want people to say, if I'm having a bad day and I'm looking for some encouragement, I hope I run across Chaplain Charlie Shields, because that dude's going to say something to me that's encouraging me. He's going to help me to find a silver lining in the cloud. He's going to help me to see that maybe it isn't failure. Maybe it's just delayed gratification. That's the kind of person and leader that I want to be. And that's the kind of person and leader that I want my kids to be around. And that's the kind of person and leader that you are, Colonel Matt LeClaire. You are the kind of leader that other people want to work for. And I appreciate that. Well, thank you, man. Thanks for the opportunity. I super appreciate it.
Thanks for listening today. I hope we sparked some thoughts about the people that have inspired you to be who you are today. I hope you share some of your thoughts and better yet demonstrate them for the people in your life. Our pursuit is to get a little bit better every day. Progress equals small victories stacked on top of each other, building like compound interest. Keep stacking these positive habits. Habits like getting up early, working your butt off, learning something new, being positive, and surrounding yourself with phenomenal people. Please share your comments at the links in the show notes and DM us at Teach Me to Fish podcast on Instagram or Facebook. Looking forward to our next conversation.
Times don't fly too high. Be sure to keep the ground in sight. Fly forever if you keep it tight. Love the world, but keep the sky on your mind.